Today, I have a story that's going to make you rethink the little moments in life. Have you ever had a chance encounter that completely threw you off? That's exactly what happened to me one lazy afternoon while I was fixing my bike in front of my house. What I thought was just another regular day quickly turned into something way more interesting thanks to a simple comment from someone I didn't expect. I was knee-deep in bike repairs, the sun beating down sweat dripping from my forehead, when a woman walked by and said something that made me pause. "If I were younger, I'd ask for a ride," she said, with a playful grin. And in that moment, I had no idea how to respond. What was this? Was she flirting? Or was it just a joke? Either way, it sparked something unexpected in me that would lead to a chain of events I never saw coming. Stay tuned. This is one story you don't want to miss. Hi, I'm Max. I just turned 20, and for the first time, I finally moved into my own house. Well, sort of. My parents actually gifted me this place for my 18th birthday. It was in rough shape. A fixer-upper for sure. For 2 years, I worked every spare hour to save up and slowly renovate it. The walls still creak, the paint isn't perfect, and the yard looks like it came out of a jungle movie, but it's mine, and I'm proud of it. The house sits at the end of a quiet street in a small American suburb. You know the kind. White fences, neatly cut lawns, people walking their dogs at sunset. The kind of place where neighbors know each other's names and wave from their porches. Except I didn't know anyone. I had spent so much time working on the house that I never introduced myself to anyone. I wasn't rude. I was just always too busy. I don't have a car. Never had one. My bike is my car, an old matte black mountain bike that's gotten me everywhere since I was 16. I can fix just about anything on it by now. That's exactly what I was doing on that day. I had set up my tools in the driveway, crouched beside the back while trying to adjust the chain that kept slipping off. The sun was hot and sweat dripped from my forehead onto the concrete. I didn't hear her approach. "Looks like you got your hands full," a woman's voice said. I looked up, slightly startled. She was standing on the sidewalk in front of my house wearing a simple summer dress and sunglasses. She had shoulder-length, wavy brown hair. And even though I couldn't tell exactly how old she was, I could tell she wasn't in her 20s. She had a glow about her, elegant, calm, confident, a natural beauty that made you do a double take. I wiped my hands on my shorts and smiled politely. "Yeah, stubborn chain," I said. She chuckled. "If I were younger, I'd ask you for a ride." I froze for half a second. Was she flirting? I honestly wasn't sure. I looked at her again. She had that kind of playful grin people give when they know they've caught you off guard. I smiled back. "Who says you can't ask now?" I joked. Her eyes lingered on me for a moment as if she was deciding whether to say something else. Then she laughed, softly, shook her head, and kept walking. "Enjoy the ride, neighbor." I stood there for a second, watching her disappear around the corner of the street. I had no idea who she was. I hadn't seen her before, or maybe I had in passing when I was too busy to notice. I got back to my bike, pretending to focus, but my mind was somewhere else. There was something about her confidence, about the effortless way she had teased me that stuck in my head. It wasn't just that she was attractive, it was the way she carried herself. Later that evening, I sat on my front porch with a cold soda watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. A couple walked their dog down the street. Kids played with a basketball a few houses down. Normal stuff, but I kept glancing toward the corner, half expecting her to come back. She didn't. I leaned back against the old porch swing and smiled to myself. Maybe moving here wasn't going to be as quiet as I thought. The next few days passed like any other. I finished patching up the bathroom, replaced a broken light fixture in the kitchen, and fought my never-ending battle with a wild patch of weeds pretending to be my lawn. I didn't see her again, not once. I told myself she was probably just out for a walk that day, just passing by. Still, I couldn't shake the image of her out of my mind. It was a Friday morning around 9:00. I had just gotten out of the shower, my hair still wet, when I heard a soft knock on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I pulled on a t-shirt and jogged to the door, wiping my hands on the way. When I opened it, there she was. She wore light jeans, a loose white blouse, and had a small white box in her hands. Her sunglasses were pushed up on her head, revealing warm, hazel eyes. For a second, I felt unreasonably nervous. "Hi," she said, flashing that same easy smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Not at all, I said, standing back instinctively to give her space. Can I help you? She held out the box. It's a welcome gift. Fresh donuts from a little bakery a few streets over. I figured you probably haven't had time to explore the neighborhood yet. I stared at the box, then at her, completely caught off guard. Wow, thank you. That's incredibly kind of you. I'm Elizabeth, she added, but most people just call me Liz. I took the box and smiled. I'm Max, and yeah, you're right. I've been pretty much glued to home projects. I noticed she laughed. I've seen you out here with tools more than once. That broke the ice. I stepped aside and waved toward the small kitchen just past the door. Would you like to come in for coffee? It's not much yet, but the place has 4 walls and working plumbing now. She laughed again. Sure, I'd love a cup. We sat at my tiny, mismatched kitchen table. I poured her coffee and we shared the donuts. Conversation came surprisingly easy. I learned she lived about 4 houses down in the blue house with a big oak tree out front. She'd been there almost 15 years. Her 2 children, both in their early 20s, were off at college. I raised them alone, she said quietly, sipping her coffee. Their father walked out a long time ago. We were young when we married, too young. When things got hard, he just left. I nodded slowly, unsure what to say. I'm sorry. That must have been hard. It was, she said, but there wasn't bitterness in her voice, just quiet acceptance. But it made me stronger. I had to figure it all out on my own. And I did. I told her my own story about how I had worked since I was 16, doing small jobs and summer work to save money, how I had enrolled in college but had dropped out recently when it became too expensive, how I had poured everything into fixing this house bit by bit, scraping by paycheck to paycheck. Honestly, the house isn't perfect, I admitted, looking around. But it's mine, and I like the challenge. She smiled warmly. You should be proud. Most young guys your age wouldn't have the patience or determination to pull this off. I shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed but grateful for the compliment. I noticed how easy it felt to talk to her, how natural despite the years between us. It didn't feel awkward at all. After almost an hour, she stood up and glanced at the clock. I should get going before I overstay my welcome. It was really nice meeting you, Max. The pleasure was mine, I said sincerely. Thank you again for the donuts. She walked toward the door, then paused for a second and looked back. By the way, I meant what I said the other day. I raised an eyebrow. About the ride? She chuckled softly. About wishing I was a little younger. I froze again, feeling my cheeks flush. She smiled, shook her head playfully, and stepped outside. I closed the door behind her and leaned my head against it for a second, grinning like an idiot. Something told me this was not going to be the last time we spoke. The days that followed were quiet but oddly restless. I threw myself into fixing up the house. There was always something to do. The bathroom door squeaked. A loose gutter needed reattaching. A light switch in the living room worked only when it felt like it. I had a running list of things I wanted to tackle. And yet every time I stepped outside, I found myself glancing down the street. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I hoped to see her again. It was a Wednesday, warm and breezy, the kind of day that makes you want to work outside just to feel the sun on your back. I had been out there since morning, struggling to replace a loose board on my front steps. Sweat dripped from my forehead onto the wood as I knelt there with a hammer and nails scattered around me. I heard the soft, familiar rhythm of footsteps approaching. A woman's footsteps. I paused mid-swing and looked up. There she was, Elizabeth. She wore fitted light blue jeans and a simple beige sweater with sleeves pushed casually up to her elbows. A delicate silver necklace hung at her collarbone. Her brown hair was tied loosely, just brushing her shoulders as she walked. "Hey, handyman," she called out with a playful grin, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "You're out again." I pushed myself up and wiped my palms against my jeans. At this point, I felt like the unofficial maintenance guy for the whole block. She laughed softly and stepped off the sidewalk toward the bottom of my front steps. "You're doing a good job. The place looks better every time I walk by." "Still a long way to go," I admitted, gesturing toward the uneven porch. "I guess I'm a work in progress, too." She tilted her head and smiled, studying my face for a moment longer than necessary. "Aren't we all?" she replied warmly. There was a pause, not awkward, but definitely filled with a weight I couldn't quite place. It felt like we were both trying to read each other without saying too much. I hate to ask, she trailed off, biting her bottom lip slightly. I have this leaky faucet in the kitchen that's been driving me crazy for weeks. I've tried tightening it myself, but no luck. I smiled. I could take a look if you want. Her eyes lit up. You'd really do that? Of course. Lead the way. I packed up my tools, brushed the dust off my hands, and followed her the short walk to her house. The blue house with the big oak tree, just like she had described the first day we talked. Her home had the charm of a place that had seen years of life's slightly faded paint, a worn but welcoming front porch, and blooming flowers lining the walkway. It felt lived in and warm. Inside the kitchen had cream-colored cabinets and an old farmhouse sink that had probably been there since the house was built. Family photos were everywhere. Graduations, baby pictures, awkward school portraits. There was an undeniable energy of love and family history. As I crouched by the sink, adjusting the wrench onto the stubborn pipe, she leaned back against the kitchen counter, arms folded, watching me with quiet curiosity. You know, she said, after a long pause, I really admire how hardworking you are. Most young guys your age wouldn't even know how to hold a wrench. I tightened the valve a little more and chuckled. I guess necessity teaches you fast when you're broke, and everything you own keeps breaking. She laughed. A rich, soft sound that filled the kitchen. Still, you're different, she said, looking at me like she was trying to figure out something about me. I stood and wiped my hands on an old towel she handed me. All done. Should be good now. She tested the faucet, smiled when the drip stopped, and turned to me. Suddenly, she was just a little closer than before. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I noticed the faint scent of vanilla and something floral. There was a beat, a silence that stretched comfortably between us. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. But thank you. It's no problem. She hesitated, then rested her hand lightly on my forearm for a second. Just a touch, barely there, but it sent a ripple of electricity up my arm. I owe you, she said, pulling her hand back. Let me buy you dinner. I blinked. That's really not necessary. She tilted her head again, lips curving into a soft smile. It's just dinner, Max. I found myself nodding before I even thought about it. Okay, sure. That Friday night, I met her at a small Italian restaurant a few minutes from the neighborhood. It was the kind of cozy place with dim lighting and red and white checker tablecloths. The walls were decorated with old black and white photos of Italy. The conversation flowed like we had known each other for years. We talked about home repairs, funny accidents, our favorite movies, the best pizza toppings, and terrible DIY disasters. Slowly, the conversation grew deeper. She told me about her kids, about raising them alone. The nights she cried, and the mornings she forced herself to get up and keep going. There's something about an empty house after your kids leave, she said softly, swirling her wine. It feels like you've been waiting for years for a moment you never wanted. I listened, fully present, surprised at how open she was with me. I told her about my struggle in college, about working 2 jobs to scrape enough money for repairs, and my uncertain plans for the future. You've done well for yourself, she said gently. You should be proud. We stayed at the restaurant for hours until finally we stood outside under the soft glow of street lamps. The night air was cool but not cold, she said. She walked close beside me as we slowly made our way back toward our houses. At the corner where her house was just visible through the trees, she stopped. Thank you, Max, she whispered. I had a really nice time. Me too, I replied honestly. She reached out and brushed her fingers lightly along my arm again. Good night, she murmured. I smiled nervously. Good night, Liz. As she disappeared inside, I stood motionless for a while on the sidewalk. The street was silent. The only sound was the faint hum of distant crickets. I stood there, heart racing, not quite understanding why, but knowing something had shifted between us. The next morning felt different. I woke up, stared at the ceiling fan slowly rotating above my bed, and thought about her. Elizabeth Liz. Everything about last night kept playing over in my mind. The way she smiled, the way her hand had rested lightly on my arm, the warmth in her voice when she said goodnight. I shook my head and dragged myself out of bed. I wasn't a kid, but I had never felt anything quite like this before. I knew the age difference was significant, but I didn't care. I liked her, plain and simple. Over the next week, I found myself bumping into Liz more often. At first, it was small things. She waved from across the street while trimming her hedges. She stopped me as I carried groceries from my car and offered to help. She brought me over fresh muffins just because. One afternoon, she knocked on my door with a mischievous grin. "I can't open a jar of pasta sauce to save my life. Think you could give me a hand?" Of course, I said yes. I walked over to her house and easily popped the lid open. We both laughed. I stayed a little longer than necessary, and she didn't seem in a hurry to see me go. As days turned into nights, our connection deepened. I would find any excuse to walk past her house. She would find any excuse to wave me inside. We started spending entire evenings together. We cooked dinner at her place, ate on the back porch under string lights, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Sometimes she would rest her hand gently on my knee as she laughed. Sometimes I would tuck a loose strand of her hair behind her ear as she looked at me with those soft, knowing eyes. I remember one night in particular. I had invited her over to my place. I had cooked spaghetti, my go-to impress meal. We ate on my tiny patio table under a full moon. The conversation slowed as the night deepened. The air grew still. She looked at me and whispered, "You make me feel alive again, Max. I don't know how to explain it." I swallowed hard. I felt the same way. I had dated girls my own age before, but this was something completely different. There was depth. There was tenderness. There was real understanding. When she leaned forward and kissed me for the first time, it wasn't rushed or messy or awkward. It was soft, deliberate, and full of feeling. Her lips were warm against mine, her hands slowly resting on the sides of my face. We paused, looking at each other. Both of us knew what we were doing. We knew the risks, the unspoken rules, the judgment that would come from others if they knew, but none of it mattered in that moment. From then on, our nights together changed. I would bike over to her house after sunset. She would leave the porch light on. Sometimes we just sat on the couch watching old movies, her head resting on my shoulder, my arm wrapped around her waist. Sometimes we slow danced barefoot in her living room to soft music. Other nights, we let the passion take over. I won't describe the details. All I will say is that it was natural, mutual, and deeply respectful. It never felt wrong. It felt like two people who had both been lonely for too long, finally finding comfort in each other. Liz confided in me late one night, her head resting on my chest. "When I was younger, I thought I had it all figured out. Marriage, kids, the perfect house. But life had other plans. My husband left me before I even knew what real love felt like. I spent 20 years raising my boys, working 2 jobs, always sacrificing, always forgetting I was more than just a mother. I never got to live." I held her tightly and whispered, "Then let me give you that, even if it's just for a little while." And I meant it. We started going out together. At first we avoided being seen too close to home. I took her to the city for late dinners, small concerts, open mic poetry nights, and even nightclubs. I introduced her to the world. I knew my friends, my spots, my pace. At first she was hesitant. The music was loud, the people young, the energy high. But I watched her slowly loosen up, laugh, and even dance like no one was watching. She spun in circles under neon lights, grabbed my hand, and pulled me along. I had never seen her so free. "Jake, this is insane," she yelled over the music one night, breathless from dancing. "I haven't done this in 20 years. I smiled and pulled her closer. "Then tonight is for you." We stayed out till sunrise, walking hand in hand through empty streets, talking about everything: dreams, regrets, hopes, fears. As we reached my bike parked on the curb, she wrapped her arms around me and rested her head on my chest. "I feel alive again," she whispered, and I felt the same. That night, as I rode home alone on my bike, I knew I was living something rare, something unexpected, something I would never forget. I never expected something like this to happen. Not here, not with her, not like this. Yet every time I walked up the sidewalk to her house and saw her waiting on the porch with that soft smile, I knew I didn't want to be anywhere else. Weeks turned into months. Our secret became our comfort. There was an unspoken understanding between us. We didn't label it. We didn't define it. It wasn't boyfriend and girlfriend. It wasn't a fling. It wasn't even just friendship. It was ours. We had built a world only the two of us understood. I would spend my evenings at her place after work. Sometimes we would cook together, arguing playfully over whether garlic bread should be soft or crispy. Other times we'd sit on the porch swing with glasses of wine watching the sky fade into night. The silence was never awkward. There was peace in just being near her. Occasionally Liz would glance out at the street nervously if a neighbor walked by. "Do you think anyone suspects she asked me one night?" Maybe I answered honestly. "But does it matter?" She shook her head and leaned against me. "No, I stopped caring about what people think a long time ago. We never crossed boundaries in public. We barely touched in front of others. But behind closed doors, we were real wrong honest. We both knew it wasn't forever. We never talked about the future, and maybe that's what made it so perfect." One night as we lay under a blanket on her couch, the soft flicker of candlelight filling the room, Liz spoke words I'll never forget. "I want you to know this has been the happiest I've been in years." I squeezed her hand. Me too. I could feel her eyes on me even in the dark. "I know this can't last, Jake," she whispered. "You're going to meet someone your age. You'll have a family, a normal life." I stayed silent, the words hitting me harder than I expected. "Promise me something," she continued softly. "Promise me you'll remember me. Not as the older woman down the street, but as the person who made you smile when you were still figuring things out." I turned toward her and traced my fingers along her cheek. "I promise." We didn't say anything else that night. We just held each other, knowing deep down that the chapter we had written together was slowly coming to an end. As fall arrived, our meetings became less frequent. Liz became busier with volunteer work and occasional trips to visit her sons. I got a full-time job offer at a local construction company and started spending my days on job sites. Too exhausted at night to do anything but sleep. We both felt the distance creeping in, but neither of us fought it. That was the beauty of what we had. It had never been about holding on too tightly. It had been about living fully in the moment. The last time I saw her as more than a neighbor was simple and perfect. I had stopped by to return a book she had lent me. She invited me in. We sat together on the porch swing one last time. There was no drama, no tears, just gratitude. "You've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever," she said quietly. "You gave me my youth again." I smiled. "You gave me something too, Liz. You showed me what it means to really be there for someone." We hugged for a long time. When we pulled apart, she kissed me softly on the cheek. "Goodbye, Jake. Goodbye, Liz." I walked back to my house, under the cool autumn sky leaves crunching under my boots, the air crisp with the promise of change. I stood on my own porch and looked back down the street at her house. The porch light was still on, just like always. I smiled. That chapter of my life was over, and I was okay with that. We stayed neighbors, friendly occasionally, waving occasionally, chatting in passing. We both moved forward with our lives. But that secret world, that wild, beautiful, impossible romance was ours. I never told anyone. I never needed to. And even now, years later, whenever I ride my bike past that house, I smile to myself. I remember I kept my promise. So, after everything that happened, what do you think? Was it just a harmless moment between two people, or did something deeper lie beneath the surface? Some might say age is just a number, while others might argue that relationships between people from different stages of life come with their own set of complications. Is it possible for someone young and someone older to truly connect on a deeper level, or is it just a fleeting moment of excitement that eventually fades? I can't be the only one who's wondered about these things. What do you think? Could a connection like this turn into something more, or is it better left as a moment of fun and curiosity? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow me for more stories just like this. I promise you won't want to miss what's coming next. Or if you're feeling inspired, hit the #1 key to show your support and keep me motivated to create more content.